Welcome to This Time in History. This is the Ward 13 virtual debate. I am so honored and privileged to be able to do this. I am your host, Matthew. Unfortunately, my co host could not join me tonight, but that is okay. I wish her well. And with that, we'll proceed. So, the format is simple for my listeners. If you've seen my other debates, you know the format. There'll be an opening statement for each candidate, three sets of questions, a debate period for each set, and a closing statement for each candidate. So to get us started, we'll go in order of attendance. So Miguel, you'll start. Nikki, you'll go second, and Caroline, you'll finish us off, and then we'll get into the sets of questions. So go ahead, Miguel.
Uh, Good evening, everybody. My name is Miguel Avila, and I'm indigenous from Peru. I live in Toronto, Ward 13 for the last 11 years. I am a housing activist, advocating for my community at City Hall and on the streets of Toronto as a regular protester since the year 2010. I stand for social and environmental justice issues, food security, police accountability, and animal rights issues. I ran in 2014 when Toronto City Council had 44 seats. I came out on 7th place. I had 3 children, Michelle, Melissa, and Michael. Currently, the reason why I'm running for council is because there is no indigenous representation at City Hall since the year 2018, when the last indigenous representative lost his seat, Ward 17, to Councilor Ana Bailao. So since then, we don't have an elected indigenous representative at Toronto City Council. And as we celebrated last week, the Truth and Reconciliation in Toronto, one of the things that we need to have is an elected voice that is currently not available in City Hall chambers. Because what we want is no more reconciliation. What we want is reconciliation, transformal changes in society. On October 22nd, vote Miguel Avila. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miguel. Nikki, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. My name is Nikki Ward, and that's handy that if you want to have a ward councillor, you'll end up with Councillor Ward if I get elected. I came here about 35 years ago on a business, no, more than that, on a business trip, and I fell in love with Toronto Centre. I came from Europe originally, and this is just an amazing place. It's a perfect blend of North American hustle, but it's got some European qualities about it. It's got at the time it was very diverse, and it was clear to me at the time that that's where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. And since that time, I've worked here, but I've also been a citizen advocate in the community throughout that time. Served on the board of directors of the 519
Recording in progress.
At the 519 Community Center, as the initially as a volunteer, and then on the board of directors. I've helped led the team to change gender identity at the constitutional level to charter rights in the Canadian Constitution. I've been a vocal advocate on behalf of human rights, disability rights, missing and murdered, and again, police accountability. On the flip side of that, I've also been, I was the vice president of an insurance company with a significant budget. And that's relevant because the role of city councillor has changed dramatically over the years. It's no longer a small operation, but more like running $1 billion business, which I have had experience in. So I've run in the past as a Green Party candidate, so my environmental qualifications, I think, are above reproach. But our campaign is one of a coalition of support across parties. And again, that's an important part of what we bring to the table, because the things we need to fix at City Hall are not partisan in nature. They are basic and practical. So we regard ourselves as small p, progressive, certainly we owe that, but capital P, practical and pragmatic.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And I'm glad to see that my co-host has joined us. Hello, Ebony.
Hi, sorry about that. I was not feeling myself really, a bit under the weather, but managed through the help of Monster Energy. This is not promoted, but to manage to drag my butt here. So thanks for having me, and sorry again for the intrusion.
And Caroline, with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Well, first I was going to wish Ebony a speedy recovery, but clearly I don't need to do that because Ebony has her sports drink. So first I just wanted to say thank you, Matt, and to Ebony for hosting this debate, because I think, you know, your platform and this time in history is very pivotal to what it is we are actually doing as a part of this campaign. So first I'd like to start by thanking you for hosting this debate. I think it's marvelous, your engagement. As you noted, my name is Caroline Murphy, and I'm seeking the honor of representing Ward 13 as City Councillor in the upcoming election, early polls starting, and voting day, October 24th. So a little bit about myself. I first came to Toronto back in the early to mid 90s as a summer work abroad student. And it was a rough summer, but I recognized the greatness that Toronto had to offer and how much somebody could really grow and flourish and be a contributing member of the community. So after I finished my degree in Ireland, I came back and started working first in the hospitality industry, which I think is important because it shows the importance of working in diverse communities and understanding as you're serving people, which is the role of city councillor. It is to serve our constituents in our community. Shortly thereafter, I actually moved into the Cabbagetown area, which is now Ward 13, and I never left. It reminded me of a home away from home, because obviously there was the Irish influence here, but also it was a community that welcomed me and created a home for me, and there was support and there was collaboration amongst neighbours to make sure we were all looked after. And part of what has spurred me to run for city councillor is I'm not seeing that anymore. I'm seeing, and this isn't to be negative, it's just that I'm seeing a world where we're allowing divisive language. We're allowing ourselves to be us versus them, landlord versus tenant, you know, landlord or renter versus homeowner, developer versus community. And I think that when I look back over the years, Ward 13 allowed me to grow as a person, mature as a person, but also to build the life that I wanted and could contribute back. So I've been very fortunate. I've worked in the financial services industry for close to 2 decades, working both in Europe as well as here in Canada, under governance as well as project management. And so bringing that back into the councillor role, everything we do is to be held accountable to our residents, not to party lines or an ulterior agenda or to, you know, a developer's agenda, but it is about client servicing. And most importantly, it's about accountability to our constituents and to our fellow residents. And to that end, I think we need to bring this back into City Hall, you know, be able to show accountability for every dollar spent and to ensure that we're communicating and working together in a manner that this ward is pivotal in. We are the heart of Toronto, and together we can continue to really move forward in a positive, collaborative fashion. And this is why I'm running and respectfully requesting people to consider me as your next city councillor.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And now we're going to start the first set of questions. We're going to start with crime. And so we're going to rotate the candidates. So Miguel started with the with the introduction. So the first question, we're going to start with Caroline. and sorry, with Nikki and then Caroline. I apologize, and then we'll end with Miguel. Ebony, do you want to ask your question, and then I'll ask mine, and then we can get started.
Certainly. My question to you is, what do you think we could do to demote crime rather than putting more police force into the neighborhood? And I mean, out of the box ideas, perhaps urban design or, community programs. And I'd like you to be, again, specific and speculative. I want to hear your ideas on how we can approach this.
And my question would be, there's a certain mayoral candidate, if he wins the chair, he wants to bring back carding as a tool for the Toronto police to use. I'd like to know how you feel about this and why. Nikki, go ahead.
Okay, well, the question, thank you very much. The questions are related, of course. My answer is going to be, one common theme to my answers is that we've put our full policy on our website, and safety and accessibility is a big enough issue that we've got a whole section dedicated. So for those who are interested in doing a deeper dive, nikkyward.ca, and there's a whole policy section there. But specifically to use your language, and I love the idea of demoting rather than promoting crime. I live in the riding, and I've seen an increase in what I describe as lashing out behavior, lateral violence. I've seen people in overcrowded shelters not feeling safe there, and then spilling out onto the seats and into the streets and parks. And this is, due to a whole host of core issues, many of which are long-term in nature. So poverty, lack of access to housing, and mental health and addiction. The lack of addiction services is frankly criminal. The fact that we do not provide adequate healthcare services when we know there's a crisis going on is morally bankrupt, as well as being not smart. So those are the core issues behind it. In terms of talking speculatively, or not so speculatively, frankly, we see a role for the health department, the City of Toronto, which receives a significant budget and was mobilized during COVID to deal with the COVID crisis. And we see no reason why that shouldn't also happen with the crisis of mental health and addiction that is spilling out onto our streets and then subsequently becoming criminalized. Because the fact of the matter is that mental health and addiction are healthcare issues, not policing issues. And so criminalizing those is not only inappropriate, we know it doesn't work. And the police themselves acknowledge that. So one of our solutions, one of our many solutions, is to transfer or repurpose some of the funding that goes into our overall emergency services, and that's close to $2 billion, to move a significant portion into EMS, paramedic services, to deal with the medical issues that are on our street right now. Secondarily, we're talking about repurposing police, retasking police to do the things that they are tasked to do, which is enforce or support general safety on our streets with the cars and the transportation, because the biggest killer in our streets after fentanyl is the transportation crush that we're seeing on our streets, and making sure that police officers are actually doing proper policing work as opposed to engage in criminalizing people who are suffering is an important part of what we do. To speculate, well, I mean, there's an awful lot that we can do right now, but we have community centers within the City of Toronto that are vastly underused as community centers. I used to work on the 519, so I know of what I speak, that much of the area that should be put to the use of community is in fact being used for administration and unnecessarily. John Innes will shortly be shut down because of massive construction plowing through Moss Park. So this speaks to a lack of coordination between municipal services. I mean, I could go on, as I say, we have a very, very deep platform on this issue. Going back to the carding and profiling, well, clearly that does not work. I was just talking with a friend of mine today. When I left the UK a long time ago in the 70s, they had a thing called the sus law. That meant a police officer could, if just on suspicion of you having something going on, could detain you. And this is very much like the profiling carding that we've seen today. It does not work. It creates attention. It creates tension. It's divisive. and obviously 100% against that as being ineffective, costly, and divisive for our city.
Thank you so much. Caroline, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I am. It's not often. So thank you. First thing I'm going to say is, look, we all deserve to feel safe walking around our streets, going to and from our homes or work, or just going out for a stroll. Treating policing and security and safe streets in isolation doesn't work, and we know that. You know, there is a holistic approach to everything that our ward is facing. You know, we have a mental health crisis, yes. We have a housing crisis, yes. We do have people feeling unsafe walking in and around the neighborhoods, and that's just wrong. Now, we do know that there was a pilot program of unarmed, medically trained mental health people who were going out to address issues that the police, you know, weren't the right approach for. We need to roll that out across the board. We need police focused on what the police need to be focused on, and that is the bigger crimes. And when we don't have proper training for the police to address mental health issues, then this is where this specialty team comes in. I don't think we have to be speculative in that. In the conversations I've had in the various neighborhoods in the area, be it in Moss Park or Regent Park or in St. Jamestown, they want more community policing. They're not asking for less policing, they're asking for more community policing. And by that, you know, you're investing in police officers to serve in the community in which they are serving, so they have the proper training and supports. I don't see why we can't have in higher crime areas, all the statistics are there, in higher crime areas, we should have like community-led safety booths, places that people can go to and actually ask for help that gets to the right area at the right time. Some of the safety issues that we're facing are because of additional high rises and having more people living in an area. The communities know what they need from their safety perspective. So we need to work more collaboratively with the communities as to what sort of things they need. And it could be things like, you know, alerts that go out across the board so that people are aware of an issue happening. But really, it's the community development safety-led programs that will actually help address some of these items. Having the unarmed medically trained to deal with the true mental health crisis and recognize that our policing is there to serve and protect, and that we need to give them the proper tools and support and have them work within the communities they're serving. But the key element is recognizing that all of this is interlinked. If we don't address affordable housing, if we don't address mental health, if we don't ensure that there's proper accountability at City Hall for all the dollars that are being spent, then we're not addressing safer streets. And we're having people living in encampments, and we're having bills being paid that shouldn't. When you look at the SSHA, $13.2 million in overpayment. Imagine what we could have invested in community safety, community awareness, getting our youth more engaged and having youth-focused programs, and to work collaboratively. We could have done so much with that. So we have to stop thinking that safety is an issue in isolation. It's recognizing how everything feeds in, and we're accountable to each other and to the communities to ensure that we allow for safer streets and we solution what needs to be solutioned, which will feed into safer streets.
Thank you so much. Miguel, go ahead.
All right, I will start with the comment with regards to carding. So in 2010, I became an activist fighting for police accountability. And at the time in Regent Park, we used to have a group of police officers coming to our neighborhoods and racial profilers. I was racial profiled many times in Regent Park. I know the effects of being carded. I talk about this matter at the Toronto Service Police Board, and I was one of the group that successfully removed the Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy, also known as TAVIS. TAVIS is no longer exist, and we don't want this practice to return back in 2022 or any year of any time of the next 10 years, because it only does is criminalize Black and Indigenous and people of color communities. So I totally against the returning of carding in any way, shape, or form. And with regards to the Toronto Police budget, is the highest one in on the $13 billion city budget. You know, most of your taxes that you pay to the city, your home taxes, your commercial taxes, a big chunk of that money goes into covering the staff and salaries of the Toronto Police. $1.2 billion is the current amount for the police budget. And Mayor John Tory has sat at that board for the last 8 years, perpetuating the same budget as usual at a rate of 1.7% increase, inflationary increase. We haven't seen no decrease. Instead, they always come up with some excuse to increase the police budget. Additional to that, the government of for every year, whenever there is a shooting or scam or anything goes on the media, it comes and delivers a check, personal check to the Toronto Police Services at the amount, according to the Toronto Star, he has given like $200 million in additional funds to the Toronto Police Services since the year 2018 when he was elected. So you see, we have a problem. We invest in policing and we disregard other city services. We have always said, and we will say it again, one of the roots of gun violence in this city is poverty, lack of housing, trauma issues, intergenerational traumas. We got to deal with these issues first. Mental health, addictions. So by defunding the police and divesting it and transferring 50% to our Black and Indigenous and people of color communities that are affected by criminalization by the police, we will be able to reduce the amounts of number of crimes in the city because people will be able to eat. That's basically what people are motivated to do, something that they're not normally accustomed to do because there is no food on the table. And young moms, young people are forcing to do illegal activities because in Ontario disability, you can't survive on a 5% a gift from DAC4. 5% is translated into $34, my friend. $34 doesn't cover the expenses at the grocery store. So by defunding the police, we will achieve what we have always asked the mayor of the city of Toronto. Divesting, defund, demilitarize, disarm, and eventually rebrand the police into another organization that is less violent towards people of Black, Indigenous communities. And to conclude my statement, that pilot project that is currently active for Toronto East does not have funding. It's a joke. It should be having funding and permanently for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now the floor is open to debate this issue. And if there's another issue related to crime, you can also bring that up. So go ahead.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to riff on here. I see we have a kitty joining us. There's a couple of things I want to riff on. And I do want to point out that profiling is essentially institutionalized bigotry. And while it's certainly true that that affects people of color, people Native and Indigenous, It also affects those of us who are gender non-conforming. And I can tell you that some of my sisters in the trans community have suffered harshly at the hands of this bigotry. We mustn't forget that, so we mustn't forget that gender identity must also be part of that discussion. The deeper challenge around demoting, again, to use that wonderful term that was raised earlier, is that most of the crime, or most of the criminality, should we say, that is identified as crime, is due to those people who are wrestling with addiction. Because as pressing as the need for food is, the need to feed one's habit is even greater. So, and also the nature of when one is wrestled, is in the grip of addiction, of course, one is led towards darker choices. So money needs to be spent on intervention. I also don't agree with something that's been raised earlier, was to say that the police are not well trained in this regard. They are, in fact, extremely well trained, frustrated because they don't have the tools at the job to do the job of helping people, and frustrated because they themselves recognize that the task of helping somebody with mental health and addictions is not one that should fall in the hands of police services. And indeed, there are many services in existence right now that do supplement that. Of course, paramedic services, as I said earlier, but also in terms of those involved in the sex trade. There's Maggie's Place, there's the Gerstein Center, which does an enormous amount of outreach, Streets to Homes, the Park Ambassadors. And so there are actually separate areas that do this work, and that some of them is funded provincially and federally, and some by the city themselves. So the issue here is largely, not to disagree with what's been said earlier, but the issue here is not the absence of skill, nor indeed the absence of people. It's the lack of coordination by the city councillor to actually bring these different entities together and make sure that we're working in harmony, and again, to more holistically. So I think there's nothing to really debate here. I think all three of us are very much on the same side, with perhaps slightly different strategies for dealing with this. So I wouldn't disagree with any of my colleagues up here, but I would say that a deeper knowledge and a deeper insight into how the city works and how the city does not work, and what we can do in the short term to take those resources that we have, those human resources and those financial resources, and use them more efficiently, I think is the best and fastest and frankly the most effective way of moving forward.
And I think if I was to add on to what Nikki is saying, I mean, she's right. None of us are going to disagree, because, I mean, it is a fact of the matter. But I think one piece that also needs to be further enhanced and looked at is actually community engagement, because all the relevant community areas are aware of what their safety concerns are, and we can start to work collaboratively and together to implement plans that are neighborhood specific. So safety, no matter who you talk with in Ward 13 or in Toronto, safety is on everybody's minds. And even today, I mean, for some people, crime is just, whether or not their car gets stolen. And, reports came out today as to the highest crime rate of cars being stolen. So every area has their concern as to the specificity of the crime. And I think when we work together and recognize that we do have, and this is what makes Ward 13 so fabulous, is it is the most diverse ward. And we have our different community areas, and it's within those areas we should listen and say, okay, and listen to the experts, the people who actually, this isn't necessarily a politician saying this is the right approach. It's listening to the experts, listening to the medical community, listening to the people who are actually out there day by day, dealing with the situations, and keeping that conversation going as to what they need. And then what do the specific neighborhoods need? And this isn't about, creating all sorts of difficulty and bureaucracy and having ongoing debates and consultations, but the nuances to us solutioning are specific in some cases to the area in which we're serving. And so the people who are there day after day, you know, we need to listen to what are the challenges the EMS are facing. Are they getting the right supports? Do they have the right skill sets? You know, our first responders, we need to make sure that we're not doing, and this is something that we have been doing for the last number of years as we address the homelessness, affordability, safety, all the rest of it. We're taking a one size fits all and saying this is the solution. But in Ward 13, we're nuanced and we have our specific community needs. And we need to make sure we're solutioning for those and communicating across the diversity of the ward, that everybody's aware of what we're doing to create safer streets, a safer environment, food on the tables, and housing that is much needed. And I recognize in part of my earlier response, carding doesn't work. I know Nikki spoke to the UK. I can speak to experiences in other parts of Europe and here. Racial profiling isn't the solution. So again, it's listening to each other and what each other's needs are that we can do the right thing.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to move on to our second set, which is the housing crisis. Ebony, you're up.
Sure. Wondering where you guys think we might be able to find space for affordable housing. Like I've heard, you know, perhaps we should appropriate the lots of abandoned buildings. If no one's planning on doing anything with them in a timely fashion, that we should be using those to house the homeless. Again, out of the box kind of thinking. I'd like to hear what your ideas are and how we could implement, you know, I don't know, I've heard like modular housing, etc. I'm open to all sorts of ideas. Where do you think we can pull the affordable housing from?
And my question would you be in favor or support of a rent freeze and or legalization of rooming houses? Caroline, you can start, and then I believe it's Miguel, and then Nikki will finish us off for this round.
Okay. I think one of the first things that we all need to look at and recognize is the city's leadership role in addressing the housing affordability crisis at its root. So development for the sake of development doesn't work. Globally, we have seen it. It has been proven over and over and over again. We've also seen, you know, there's different housing elements, whether it's in Vienna or Singapore. And one of the things Singapore has done is they've destigmatized social housing. So I think that is part of the process as well, is recognizing that we all need help at some stage. And there's varying facets to housing needs, whether it's short-term emergency, need help now, to longer-term getting back on the feet, to actual home ownership. Something that can't be addressed at a municipal level is housing has become, in Canada, it's the financialization of housing has also added a little bit of challenge into the affordability. But I also say you have to think about affordability in two ways. There's making enough units, and we recognize, and I don't think anybody will disagree, that there is a housing shortage. We do need more units for the volume of people anticipated to come here over the next 10 years. And that's an Ontario thing. We recognize that Toronto, because most people are coming to Toronto, does bear the brunt of having to create housing that works for whether it's a student who's here for 2 or 3 years, or whether it's a new immigrant who needs a roof over their head, or whether it's a long-term resident who needs support. Not all of that has to happen in Ward 13. We do have to look at spreading out across the whole of Toronto and not just focusing on the downtown of Toronto. But to that end, and maybe getting a bit more specific, we need a city-led, not-for-profit development corporation. Because a developer comes in, they're there for the money, they build and they leave. They're not part of the community. So if we have a city-led development corporation, we can reflect the needs of our community, the needs of the residents in the area in which we are going to develop. We also need to make sure that as a part of this process, we're creating a community infrastructure. So we're recognizing multi-generational, we're recognizing whether it's students, we're recognizing if daycares are needed or a library or grocery stores, but it's about reflecting the needs of us and our seniors and our families and individuals. We need to create money as well to do some of this development. So first, let's refurbish all the buildings that are out there. Let's develop in a manner that is sustainable and makes sense to the community that the development is taking place in. A lot of people will talk about removing, the single zoning development, but again, it has to be done in a manner that makes sense and that solutions. So developers who are building and developing and skirting bylaws in parts of the process that they're doing and going straight to the Ontario Land Tribunal, we need to have surcharges, we need to have oversight, we need to have accountability, and we need to have a plan, because it's not about developing just for today, it's about tomorrow. And can we support, and do we have the infrastructure to support all these people coming to one area? We need to also ensure that we have proper data. Where do we need the development? What is needed? What is the strategic end goal? And this is why, as councillors, we can't be beholden to anybody. We have to be beholden only to our residents and what makes sense that is sustainable to the environment, to the growth of the city and the sustainability of it. As I've mentioned, we need to destigmatize social housing, and we do need some surcharges going on developments that don't have at least 30% of affordable units in it. So it's not necessarily about looking at legalizing rooming houses or development in isolation. It's the root, because again, it feeds back into everything: mental health, addiction, safe streets. And if you're not creating an environment that promotes better living, more affordability, and let's not forget, affordability is also about keeping people in their homes. So every time we go after a ratepayer and we increase rates and we're not holding to proper account City Hall and the auditability of the finances, because remember, for every dollar that we're raising in property taxes, we're only keeping about 20 cents or less of it here in Toronto. So we need to have that proper accountability, because if we're just developing, it's not making sense. So affordability is also about keeping people in their homes, because if we price people out of their homes, where are they going? So I come back to, it's a holistic approach that needs to be done with a level of planning and strategic, absolute 100% strategic planning with the proper engagement of the communities, and stop just deciding to develop, because we've seen it is not working. And we have people living in encampments in Allen Gardens. Shame on us. Shame. So what we've been doing for the last 8 and 10 years with politicians leading hasn't solutioned and hasn't brought us anywhere near where we need to be as a world-class city.
Thank you so much. Miguel, go ahead.
Well, the first thought in my mind is inclusionary zoning. This has been the most contentious issue at City Hall. Every time progressive councillors like tonight have come to City Council and asked the mayor, let's make some changes so that new construction developments include up to 10% of people who are poor to live in those towers, was defeated time and time again. So this policy of inclusionary zoning will have allowed to include more people in RGI to live in these new condominium developments, but because of lobbyists telling councillors that it is ridiculous to have poor people living with the middle class or the rich, is the reason why it always got defeated, because they can't imagine to have people that are poor living in these new developments. Anyhow, we have a small winning, a city council a year and a half ago We have an inclusionary zoning, which is a work in progress. With regards to rooming houses, I used to live in a rooming house when I came to Canada in 1991. It was one hell of a place. I think we need to think carefully about legalization of rooming houses as we're thinking about ways and solutions for housing affordability. With regards other alternatives, we have explored many ways to include more social housing to be built, but City Council has not done the proper work in the last 8 years under John Tory. Now John Tory, because he's seeking re-election for the third time, is coming and saying, yes, we want to do the magnificent work that you have told us time and time again. We need to build housing with support services. But you know what happened? We have now the Doug Ford government interfering with the business of the city. If we got elected today, we won't be able to fight any proposal passed forward by the province, because the province is for profit, and all the developers and all the condominium developers are connected politically and financially to the conservative and liberal governments. So any prospect of doing work to improve our housing crisis will have to be fought at Queen's Park and at City Hall to defeat any proposals by the province. As you know, the mayor's powers is a threat to our democracy at City Hall. I was arrested last year at Trinity Bellwoods Park, defending the rights of indigenous people that were being evicted out of the park. They were promised rooms in hotels. They were promised room in temporary housing, but not permanent housing. Many of those residents who left and went over to hotels, many of them are living in Island Gardens. I have friends in Island Gardens. Currently, there are like 30 tents. The last time I counted, it's shameful, as Caroline has stated. And of course, this will take political will at City Council. We know that the province is providing funding, but not at the same rate as the federal and is providing to the city. The province of Ontario is holding back payments for the operation of these new housing operations. So we had to demand Doug Ford to come to the table with their 1/3 of the deal. 1/3 is what we always had asked contributions from the province, but Doug Ford is not committed to that plan. His plan is to sell homes, my friends. He doesn't care about the poor. So whatever we do at City Hall, it's gonna be a tough battle to defeat the mayor if we get 2/3 to oppose his wishes. And frankly, in all honesty, the next 4 years is gonna be one hell of a municipal government under John Tory and Doug Ford. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nikki, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that's a prerequisite for being a councillor in Ward 13 is a deep understanding of how the city works or doesn't work. And so I need to fact check a few things that have just been said. Number one is that rooming houses in Toronto Centre are not illegal. They're illegal in Scarborough and some other parts of Toronto. Multi-tenant housing, to use the fancy term for it, is licensed in order to keep it safe for the tenants. So we don't have slumlords. So I'm not going to speak to an issue about Scarborough because Scarborough does have this exclusionary rule that is not fair. Obviously, as a councillor, I'm interested in the city of Toronto as a whole, and that is objectionable. And it is objectionable that the rest of the city of Toronto does not hold up its part of the housing services that we need to provide. One of the reasons we have problems in the downtown core here is because the outer parts of Toronto are not doing their part to pick up the slack. So let's just begin with that. The second thing I'd like to say is that I agree with destigmatizing social housing because, quite frankly, I live in social housing. I'm a proud co-op member of City Park Co-op. I'm glad to do that. I'm one of the few renters. And I'd like to also point out that renters also pay significant taxes and at a rate that is higher than regular homeowners. It just happens to be hidden in our rent. And so this notion of ratepayers and renters is a false dichotomy. So just to correct on that. As to the notion of a housing corporation that is not built for profit, but is in fact for the benefit of the citizens of Toronto. Once again, this already exists. It's called Toronto Community Housing Corporation. Now it's not doing what it's supposed to do. It's not, it has far too many properties that it cannot adequately maintain. But we don't need to create this because it already exists. What we need to do is reform it. Now that reformation can come in a couple of different ways. Number one, to divide out, the largest landlord in Toronto is the City of Toronto, mostly through Toronto Housing Corporation, but also through other groups, like indeed the Toronto District School Board, which is a big property owner and indeed property developer. So one of the many strategies, and again, this is on our website in great and possibly even nerdy detail, is we have as one of the plans is to help Toronto Community Housing Corporation return more of its inventory to a state of habitability. Frankly, if all of TCHC's properties were habitable, safe places to live, we wouldn't have a problem in Toronto. But they have gotten too large and simply have lost control. I don't agree with turning over empty property because that still needs to be built upon. And I'd like to see empty property stay parkland, for example, because we need park space. That said, I am very much in favor of using city-based properties, as we have in Toronto Centre, that are falling into a state of disrepair, and transferring the management and development of those and the expansion of those to the co-op, to co-ops that live in the same area. The co-op that I'm involved with, City Park Co-op, is a small village of about 1,000 people, 750 units, many of them rent geared to income, aging in place, and this is housing for the people, by the people. It's a successful model that we know works. And so that speaks profoundly to the idea of affordability. I'd also like to, if not correct, but at least inform my fellow candidates that affordability itself is a problematic issue. Because as the City of Toronto uses the term affordability, that's based on a rolling average. So affordable is 80% of the average rent. Well, that's no good because the rent is going up and up. We must be using affordability as a measure of income, not as a measure of how much people are charging. I mean, this is completely backwards. The affordability of a chair, for example, is based on how many people can afford to buy a chair, not the price of chairs. So with the measuring system is all wrong. Again, I'd like to correct some. The City of Toronto is a deeply layered organization with a $15 billion budget. And so you really have to understand how the thing works before you can even begin to make the kind of changes that we will do, or I will do as your next councillor. The Ontario Municipal Board no longer exists, Caroline. It doesn't exist anymore. What has replaced it is the LPAT, which is the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. Now, the problem with that, if you really want to do a super deep dive, is that it is completely, has no power or authority. And the province is making decisions about large-scale developments. The inclusionary zoning thing is a good idea, and I think something that we can focus attention to. So, short term, we're talking about repurposing TCHC housing, carving some of that out, helping TCHC restore some of its properties to habitability, not having them build new ones, but to return the old ones to better states of being, and where appropriate, divest some of those other properties. The other thing I'd like to suggest, again, going back to rooming houses, this is deeply problematic because we have cases of absolute abuses within the City of Toronto where slumlords are treating people with, one bathroom shared between you know, 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 older gentlemen, fire safety rules ignored. So this is deeply, deeply problematic, and we must license these properties. We shouldn't be making them illegal because we need multi-tenants zoning, but some of these flop houses are absolutely disgusting and very, very expensive because they tend to be occupied by people who are themselves vulnerable and at risk. Going back to our shelter system, again, we have a short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions. Our shelter system and our streets to home, go into the shelter, and then affordable housing needs to be coordinated correctly. We cannot put people in boxes, dangerous boxes, and expect them to stay there. So if you are vulnerable and have need, let's say you have a mental health or an addiction issue, and you're trying to get clean and sober, then we have to have space that is safe for that population. If you're elderly and at risk, what's happening right now in shelters is your pension or your ODSP or your OW, which is administered by the city, ODSP is of course provincial, is stolen from you because they come on, bang on your door and say, give me the money. So these are terrible, terrible places. There's far from being a transition from living to the streets into nice housing. These are horror stories. They're nightmarish. Ask me how I know. I know because for 25 years, I volunteered at the 519 and I went into shelters 25 years ago. And I saw the conditions then and the conditions now. Right now, the whole process is funded based on an arbitrary and profoundly broken measuring system, number of beds. Guess what? Stack them high and stack them close together, because if you go to bed, you're going to get a check from the city of Toronto. And we end up with basically hotels converted into modern day ghettos where people are living in appalling conditions. The social situation within there is broken down, and that spills out onto the streets. Let's face it, if you're abused in your own home, that has to spill out in negative ways on the streets. So with the utmost respect, these cannot be fixed with platitudes. These cannot be fixed with nice ideas. They can only be fixed by people who are compassionate and of good heart, of which there are many in this discussion right now and elsewhere. But it has to be somebody that actually understands how the system works and how to affect that change. I'm going to throw in one other thing, because I don't want to dump on the people who have taken the time to come out to this meeting, but I am deeply, deeply disappointed that other candidates who believe themselves to be prominent and indeed anointed for this position have chosen not to show up, not to participate for reasons that are only best known to themselves. So again, you have my colleagues here have the misfortune of being in a debate with me here, but really we need to be, there are other people who should be here and who are not. So
thank you so much. Thank you. And now the floor is open to debate this issue and anything else relating to housing. Miguel, I see you have your hand up, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew, and Ebony, for putting this together tonight. I want to also reiterate what Nikki has said with regards to rent freeze or rent control mentioned by Caroline. You know, we are unfortunately a creature of the province. Toronto City Hall needs to seek its independence. And I sound a little bit controversial right now, but I'm going to be realistic too. You know, many times people have said, what if we declare our independence and autonomy from the province of Ontario? That will free up a lot of our cash flow problems that we face in this city. As you probably are aware, most of the taxation done, that the taxes collected from the province, from this city, goes to other cities and municipalities that are unable to afford or to fund their own budgets. So if we do the opposite and say, well, let's fix our home issues and problems like housing crisis, we will give you whatever left that is off the pot. But the pipe is, the biggest chunk of the pipe goes to the province and the feds. And the city has to always beg the province of Ontario, come, hey, Doug Ford, when are you gonna come and put up those $85 million that you owe us? And it was revealed last June. I attended the last city council meeting. One of the outgoing councilors, Michael Layton, said, Doug Ford is not committed to help us. He wants us to suffer. He wants us to see us running to desperate our to live in chaos, and that's not the way it should be. I think the biggest battle that we're gonna face in city council is to fight that for, because the mayor, he doesn't care. He says, welcome to the mayor powers. Give me all the power because I don't care what my citizens wants. And I'm all for the developers. I'm all for the rich people. I don't care about the little people. And that has to be the biggest battle that we're gonna be facing in the next 4 years. And those are my last comments with regards to housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Any-
not that's not such an outrageous idea, Miguel. The idea of the city of Toronto becoming a chartered city is something that's received a lot of attention, and something like you, I'm very much in favor of. If not, like, I mean, we can't separate ourselves from the rest of Canada, but we can change our relationship with the rest of Canada. We're the economic engine of Ontario and the economic engine of Canada. We are the largest, the cultural centre of Ontario, and possibly, if someone would argue, Canada as well. And the fact that we do not have autonomy for our own $15 billion economy is absolutely insane. Let's face it, as your city councillor, there are 25 city councillors, each of whom are the chief executive officers of an area with 110,000 residents. That's not only larger than many Canadian cities, it's larger than some Canadian provinces, for heaven's sake. And yet we're treated like children here. It's simply unconscionable. So there we go. You know, Miguel and I come at this from slightly different angles, but we end up agreeing an awful lot on this one, and I'm sure Caroline as well.
Yeah, so I guess I would just circle back. So I apologize, Nikki, if you heard me say OMB. It could be the accent, but I'm well aware it's Ontario Land Tribunal. So that's what I was referencing, not the OMB. But I think part of, you know, what and I know we've gone a bit off topic here with the charter city that's being, you know, discussed and talked about, is, for me, the key element is not that we haven't had things in place or organizations in place. What we've had is a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. So for these organizations that are in place, we need to hold people to account. We need to make sure that the groups are communicating, that the case management files are there. And Toronto's own Auditor General has shown where there's a big gap within that needs to be closed, with the help and with all engagement from all the relevant stakeholders, both those who are clients and those who have experience, so that we are actually solutioning in a manner that can move forward, and we're not repeating the same mistakes that we have been, and that every penny, and again, it goes back to what everybody's saying, we have a finite amount of dollars in this existing budget. And as I said in my opening remarks, I'm tired of the us versus them, landlord versus tenant, renter versus homeowner. We all contribute to society in a meaningful way and in an expensive way. So it's together we solution. It's not about finger pointing. It's about accountability and transparency, and ensuring that the agencies and the organizations and the support matrices are properly held to account and executing in a manner in which makes sense for the sustainability, the growth, and the support of each other.
Thank you so much. And we'll move along now to our last set, which is cleaning up City Hall. Ebony will ask her question, and I actually have two questions. One came up in the last week. Ebony, go ahead.
Certainly. My question is, do you think that City Hall councillors receive too many perks, such as, you know, TTC passes, free park passes, housing allowance, etc.?
And my questions, the first one will be, do you believe, in your opinion, now this is all opinion based, and that's all we're after here. In your opinion, should a sitting Toronto City Councillor that's running for re-election, who has been criminally charged, be allowed to continue, or should he resign? And my second question is, there's an outcry for Tracy Cook to be fired. She's the interim city manager for her role in the encampment clearings. How do you respond to this, and why? We'll start with Nikki, and then sorry, am I getting that wrong? No, we'll start with Nikki. We'll go to Caroline, and then Miguel will finish. Go ahead, Nikki.
Ask you to repeat the questions because those are coming from slide. I'm going to just make a note here. If you can
Sorry.
repeat the questions so that we've got
No problem. So Ebony's question was about Councillor Perks, not
Okay,
the counselor,
not
but
Gord
the
Perks, but the other one, yes, Perks. And then your questions were to criminality of
not
councillors.
only someone who's running for re-election, but a sitting councillor.
Yeah, and then specifically
Tracy,
how,
the
well, I'm
interim.
not going to talk about an individual, but how
Okay.
to deal with someone when they deal with something like the encampment clearance and how poorly that was handled. All right.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. That just okay. Well, I'm not aware of a housing alliance for the for city council, so that's news to me. I'm within walking distance of City Hall, so and I already have a TTC pass, so I'm not sure if that's that's going to influence my decisions one way or the other. I do think so. I can't really comment to the perks. I mean, you do get to go to the zoo, I think, and that's one of the perks you get as a city councillor, which is nice. I haven't been to the zoo in ages, but again, that's not in Toronto Centre. I think much is made of this, to be honest with you. We are talking again about running as chief executive officer, essentially the mayor of a small city with not a lot of support. The perks are less of a concern to me than the fact that the budget for the office of city councillor isn't enough to support the number of employees that I need to do the job. So we need to look at how the office expenses for all of the city councillors, because the job has doubled in size and sometimes more than that, and we have not received double the staffing. We just need more people to follow up on the various things. Criminality, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, obviously much has been made of a sitting councillor who has been charged with a criminal offence, but not yet convicted of it, and that's an important distinction. Having said that, we are talking about a job interview that we're all going through right now, and this is the first time I've ever gone on a job interview where there hasn't been a deep study of the qualifications of the individuals and indeed a background search on many of the individuals. I've run provincially, and as part of that process, you go through what's called a green light process where they check to make sure that you don't have something nasty in the background, or that you don't have outstanding criminal charges, because we can't have MPs. You can't run for office if in that case. And it's bizarre to me that we don't do that at City Hall in the first place, right? Professionalism.
All the free.
Sorry, somebody was just.
No, that was. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. No, so professionalism amongst the candidates would be, I think, a very, very good things to check for. We shall see how this plays out. If someone is convicted of an offence and incarcerated, they are not allowed to be a councillor, and so they would have to be a by-election run in that case. That's already on the books. There's some vagueness if they have been convicted of a crime but not yet serving a sentence. So again, we do have rules in place for that. It's the timing of this is a bit unfortunate. We're in the middle of election. I'm sure there were other things to be found out, but it's only they percolate to the surface during an election here. Going back to the I'm so sorry, I can't even read my own writing here. So the criminality. Oh yes, the encampments. Yeah, one of the problems we have within City Hall right now is if there are people in place who are incompetent, unfair, uncooperative, or not doing their job, it's very difficult to let go of them. They're almost impossible to fire. By contrast, one of the questions that was asked of me recently was, are city employees paid too much? Well, I can tell you, my partner is a part-time employee with the City of Toronto. That's a gig work. That's gig work of the worst order. The City of Toronto is a terrible employee in that sense, and they lay people off all the time, which is why Parks and Recreation can't get people who are to do recreation classes or to as swimming pool guards. They can't get them because they treated them all so poorly during the COVID crisis. By contrast, you have fat cat leaders of departments who live like kings. They get paid 3 times what a councillor or even the mayor gets paid, and they're impossible to dispose of. They're a law unto themselves. And to circle back to this accountability thing, I'm a big fan of making sure that every head of department lives in some fear that if they are not competent, or if they are unfair or heavy-handed or do not follow advice, then they should be fired. Now, one of the things we haven't talked about the strong mayor thing right now, but one of the things that the strong mayor rules will have is the ability to fire people who get out of line. That backed up with a strong councillor force, that might work to our advantage. And in this particular situation, it might be something that we could do. But right now, they're invulnerable. They live unto a law unto themselves. And again, this trickles down to a whole bunch of other areas, not just encampments, but housing, transportation, TTC, you name it. The councillors have a very hard job of making sure that these folks remain accountable to all of us to do their job and to do it effectively and with caring for all of our resources, human resources and also financial resources. So great questions. I hope I came in at them from different angles. So
thank you so much. Caroline, go ahead.
You know what? I think Nikki hit a good portion on the head here. I mean, with respect to perks, that was news to me as well. I know TTC. I cycle everywhere, so Nikki walks, I cycle. So yeah, a TTC pass. So again, not being a politician, being completely independent, not having worked at City Hall, I don't know anything about the parks. So that has not been a driving force for me in getting into this. As I say, I work in the financial services world in the private sector, and some of what Nikki's saying, when you read some of the reports coming out of City Hall, when budgets go over, way over, when there's not true accountability, when invoices are being paid because somebody thinks it should be paid and it makes sense without looking at contracts, these are fireable offences. You look at the Auditor General's report about the short-term housing and the hotelling that has been mentioned before. 13.2 million in overpayment. How long would somebody in the private sector hold their job? So yes, there has to be accountability. I'm sorry, and this is something we need to work to. And maybe part of this is also about exploring really implementing terms. I know they've been talked about before, and people have, looked at them and proposed motions on terms. But again, you want to make sure that we're getting people in who are willing to be held to an account. And that is also for school trustee, to city councillor, to mayor, to all the city agencies, and that you have to return the phone call. And when I hear that councillors don't respond, or a school trustee does not respond to what parents are asking, or they respond only to a certain subsect of people, I want City Council to represent all of us, not just the special interest that you're beholden to, but actually all of us. So when you're talking about cleaning up City Hall and parks, a councillor, and Nikki has phrased it really well. So Nikki, I'm going to hand this one to you. I may even repeat it on you, but she's right. A city councillor is a CEO of this ward. And with that comes massive responsibility. So whether there's a perk or not, it has to make sense to their level of performance. And that's why, as a part of city councillor, part of myself of saying holding City Hall to account is holding myself to account, putting in measurables that you can see how I'm performing. So that if I'm not responding to your call, you can measure it. You can come back at me. Because in order to hold City Hall to account, you have to be willing to hold yourself to account. And you have to recognize that the honor of representing you as a city councillor is massive, and you owe it to the residents to honor that commitment and faith they've given you as by voting you in. And in 4 years they can vote you out. But for those who are not in the voting cycle, they need to be held to account. So to speak about legal obligations or somebody who's under criminal offense, I'm not going to speak to an individual either, because I'm not privy to all the information, and I'm not going to repeat stuff that is heard or secondhand. But there is a code of conduct and there is a code of ethics, and everybody needs to be upheld to that. And we're asking for the honor of representing you, and we're asking our residents to trust us. So yeah, they should do diligence on us. Do we have the skill set required to really navigate and collaborate and negotiate to proper win-win situations? Because a good deal is when nobody walks away 100% happy. And so we need to have that transparency. The encampments, I mean, I think I've said it, you can't just barrel in and kick people out. Everybody deserves to be treated with respect and with dignity, and we need to work together. But also we can't jump to conclusions, and we need to have the full picture. So I would expect anybody who's in city office to have the honor and honorability and dignity to recognize when they've done wrong, they should step aside. And if they don't, the voters can deal with it. And if the voters can't deal with it because of a situation they're in, then we need to bandy together as councillors and not have people think that this is a permanent pensionable job that they never have to be held to account for. So I'm not going to speak to individuals because I don't know full stories, and I would never pass judgment on, you know, stuff that you hear or see in Twitter or, you know, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt, because in this great country and in this great city, you are innocent until proven guilty, and you do deserve the right to defend your actions, but we deserve the right to hold you to account and have you defend said actions when the case dictates, as opposed to party politics, trying to play a game and get one-upmanship. So it's again, a combination thing, and you know, that's all.
Thank you.
And
So
I don't think we disagree.
thank you so much. Thank you. Miguel, go ahead.
Yes, while my friends Nikki and Caroline were talking, I already put in the chat a few tips of information. You know, in 2010, I remember former councillor and mayor Ralph Ford campaigning on the issue of free perks at City Hall. I put a link to the video. He campaigning on this because at the time, city council were giving unlimited number of passes to hand out to their constituents, to the residents. Why? With the purpose of gaining election the next time, to be reelected. So there was a mishandling of the city perks. Now that that is no longer available. So now anybody wants to get a pass, they have to go to the city library and get a math pass and apply for one of those passes. City council do not give out no more passes as they used to do before, because that was what Rob Ford was saying to taxpayers. Gravy, we have a gravy train at City Hall. Now, when it comes to City Hall and cleaning up the city, I remember Mayor David Miller campaigning on with his famous broom to clean up the corruption at City Hall. Still, we have corruption at City Hall 12 years later. Tracy Cook. There is a petition I put on the chat, by the way. It's a former police officer turned civil servant who gave the city manager her opinion about how to deal with the city incumbents. Because of her, $2.2 million was wasted on spying on city incumbents and their supporters. $2.2 million that could have been transferred to use it for subsidizing some of the residents' units that are so unaffordable. Tracy Cook deserved to be shown the door out, in my particular opinion. Second on the line is John Burnside. Burnside used to be a police officer, a councilor, and now is running for Ward 16. He is responsible for part of the clearance at Lamport Stadium. My friends, how are we rewarding bad behavior at City Council? The mayor doesn't care of his past. He says he's my buddy, and now I'm going to support him for his election hopes in Ward 16. Now, with regards the incumbents, in June 2021, there was a motion passed City Council, and our previous councilor, Christian Montam, supported the zero incumbents removal, and that vote was really a big mistake by Christian Montan at the time. And it's sad that Chris Moyes is not here to rebut any comments on this matter, but her predecessor is supporting anyway Chris Moyes, regardless. Christian Montam should have changed her mind the same day that she signed on the line to evict forcibly, violently by Toronto police. Luckily for her, she apologizes for her mistakes, but it was something done later after she found out that I got arrested at Trinity Bellevue Park. I have a meeting with her with the Region Park Neighborhood Association in July. And I told Christine one time, did you know that I got arrested at Trinity Bellevue Park? Oh no, why? Because you signed the zero eviction policy of the city. Oh no, I made a mistake. Yes, you did make a mistake. So you see, some of our residents make mistakes, just like Councilor Michael Thompson, a man that I know since 2010. The only Black Canadian sitting at City Hall. We always brag about diversity is our strength. We always brag about how much we need diversity and inclusion and many races to represent us at City Hall. So I'm not gonna be speaking on his defense, but I'm just saying that he deserves to be have a trial, a day in court, and to prove his actions were wrong or right. But at this moment in time, I don't think he doesn't need to left his campaign for re-election, because you know he is one of the few councilors that has not been engaged in scandals at City Hall. Like I know it. I know Michael Thompson. He has always been a good servant of his community in the Scarborough Center. He is the councilor where my kids live in Scarborough, and he has always shown respect for Indigenous peoples and Black communities. He served by the Toronto Police Services Board with pride, and I don't have nothing against him personally. People make mistakes, just like Christy Montang did in June 2021 when she signed that zero income eviction. So my friends, let's not judge anybody. Let the courts deal with it. And if he's proven guilty or innocent, let the courts decide. In the meantime, we should let him run. That is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now the floor is open to address any of the questions and anything else that you want to add in terms of cleaning up City Hall. Could be budget issues, whatever you like. Go ahead.
I will start. My friends, we always talk that at City Hall we don't have party divisions. That is not true. I know the councilors who wear the red t-shirt, liberals. I know the councilors who wear the blue t-shirt, conservatives. I know the councilors who wear the NDP or orange t-shirt and the green, well, or independents or progressive people. Every time there is a progressive motion to fight social inequality, food insecurity, housing, etc., defunding the police. Time and time again, these councilors elected who are representing their political colors has always defeated these motions, my friends. This is a great opportunity to elect more people, but unfortunately, our current mayor doesn't have the cojones to say to Doug Ford, give us back our 44 seats so that we can have proper representation of this city that is so diverse, and eventually we will be representing 50% of this city, indigenous, Black, people of color. We are not having that representation right now. So do not elect for John Tory, elect somebody else who can stand up to the bully Doug Ford and say, bring us back our 44 seats. And no, we don't want you interference the city council. Enough is enough. Thank you.
As somebody who's wearing a red shirt, and I know Caroline's wearing a blue shirt, and I know that neither of us identify with either of those. And by
It's
the way,
actually a
Miguel,
purple shirt.
you've got red behind you there. I see Che Guevara on red. So so just to bring that into speed. Your point is well made, though, Miguel. There is partisan politics played out at City Hall, and that is so incredibly destructive. Now, our color scheme up here has all of the colors, well, all of the political colors anyway, that emphasizes that we are coming from a place of coalition, not from a partisan standpoint. That is not true of some of the other candidates in this race. Everybody here, I believe, is fundamentally independent of the major parties. And so, and that is something that is one of the City of Toronto's dirty secrets. So well said on that front, but just because I'm wearing a red shirt today, I ran as a Green candidate. I've got many friends in the NDP and many friends in the Liberals as well, who are all of whom are behind our campaign. But the City of Toronto was used negatively by both parties on the left and on the right as a kind of proxy battleground to play out some of the other things on the national stage. And we suffer because of it, because we swing backwards and forwards. The truth of the matter is that a pothole doesn't have a political party, that a shelter doesn't have a political party. So we need to break that back. And as you rightly say, with an open seat, we have an opportunity to do that. I'll also throw back and maybe just put something else out and say, one of the great challenges that we all face is lack of participation in the municipal government process, right? Weirdly, more people vote federally, fewer people vote provincially, fewer people still vote municipally. And yet that is almost the reverse order, because in terms of housing, health, education, police services, mental health, addiction, these are the things that are dealt with at City Hall. And so I really have to say thank you to you for bringing this to the fore. And this will have a second life on YouTube. I have to say that it is deeply, deeply, deeply disturbing that one of the other leading candidates has chosen not to attend this. And it says an awful lot. I think one of the things, I won't speak for anybody else, but I came off the provincial election and we were told that a single party candidate was anointed, almost a coronation, okay, as to who was going to be the next candidate. And I'm sorry, but we don't live in a monarchy here, maybe a constitutional monarchy, but not at City Hall. We have elections, we have democracy, and if you believe in those things, then you don't simply appoint the next city councillor, to go to Caroline's point, for the rest of their natural life. We don't do that. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't allow it. And so that is why I came into this race. And to circle back to the other point about so-called perks, I have to tell you that if you are the chief executive officer with 110,000 clients and a budget of close to $1 billion, depending on how you count it, then you get paid a lot more than city councillors do. And you also get a lot more perks than city councillors do. I know it's certainly true of everybody at this discussion. We're not doing this for the money. We're not doing it for the chance to go once a year to the zoo. We're doing it because I'm doing it, because I love Toronto Centre. I hate what's happening to it, and it has to change. And therefore, this is not a pay rise for me. I'm not going to be, this is about doing the right thing and not, frankly, being paid a fraction of what the city manager is being paid. Now, I'm not going to talk about individuals, but these city managers of different departments on $200,000-$300,000, and they're not there for 2 terms, Caroline. They're there for a little while, and then they go off to another jurisdiction, New York or Edmonton or Chicago. They go all across North America. They really are, and so that, again, going back to what can be done in this office, as much as a change.org, it feels good to sign these things. But we need to have somebody at City Hall who understands the processes and the subtle processes for removing people who have done the wrong thing, because you can't necessarily fire them, but you can encourage them to seek employment elsewhere. And that's a very subtle line to follow.
Thank you. If nobody else has anything to add, we'll just go right into the closing. Oh, Caroline.
No, you're fine. We can go into closing. I've just recognized the time, so don't worry.
So Caroline, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Miguel, and then Nikki, you can finish us off. Caroline, you have the floor. Don't forget to pitch your website, and also to let all of you know, in the show notes on YouTube and eventually on Spotify, all of your websites will be listed. So go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you, Matt, and again, thank you to both you and Ebony for hosting this. Massively appreciated. And as been mentioned, it would be nice if all 9 of us were present, but it gave us a chance to have a good chat. So thank you for that. Kind of following a little bit along about what was being talked about. I mean, this is my first foray into the political spectrum. I've never sought public office before, but I do bring a tremendous amount of experience from the private sector. And ultimately, my goal is to bring us all back together and stop the partisan, stop the, as I've said before, the name calling and the divisive language, because what we've seen over the last 8-10 years hasn't brought us forward. It has literally brought us to where we are today. And yeah, some things are good, but talk to the average person, they're not feeling like things are better off. We need to bring that true strength and accountability back to City Hall. We need negotiators, and we need people who can really understand and listen and not be guided by ulterior motives, be it, like was mentioned earlier, party politics or a developer's goal, or because I'm a school trustee, now I deserve city councillor, or I'm city councillor, now I deserve MP. This is about doing what's right for us as residents and us as neighbours, and bringing back social inclusion and social cohesion in a manner that makes sense, is transparent, and does hold City Hall and each other to account for it. And that is recognizing the holistic view of, if we don't solution affordable housing, if we don't really have true transparency in how the monies are being spent and how we can be creative in bringing in more monies into the city, if we don't hold all of ourselves to account, then we're going to be faced with the unsafe streets, with the encampments growing, with more potholes growing, with garbage overflowing. There's some great things, but we can do more together and really solution through listening, through collaboration, through understanding, and through negotiation. That's why I want to run, because what I saw in the last 8-10 years isn't the Toronto and the Ward 13 that I fell in love with and embraced me and allowed me to grow as a person and afforded opportunities. We need to recognize that people lining up for school supplies because somebody has donated school supplies, and the relief of that, because now they don't have to choose between school supplies and food on their table for that week. This is a wealthy city. We should not have that. And it's together we solution, and we stop with the ulterior motives and the agendas. We make sure that monies are being spent in the manner that they are, and we negotiate and wheedle, because at the end of the day, it's the city's leadership role, and the leadership role of the CEO of Ward 13. I told you, Nikki, I would steal it. But also, one thing that we really need to focus on is also putting the environment first, because none of this matters if we don't build sustainably, and we don't look after our environment, and we don't support the Transform TO initiatives, and we really look at the sustainability that we need, because this will be moot. So really what I'm asking for is the privilege of representing Ward 13, because I have the grit, I have the stomach, I have the knowledge that we can use to work together, and I have the humility to recognize when it needs guidance from, you know, other people. But it is really about recognizing, putting ourselves first, you know, putting the environment first, holding the city to account, holding our city councillor and myself to account. And I think that by championing local businesses or local residents, creating the social development plans that we have seen work, do more, recognize the infrastructure challenges that we face, creating sustainable transit, and all the challenges, because this is the pivotal year. I know we've talked, or some have talked about an anointed one. That's not so until it's so. So this is the opportunity to really have your voice heard, because your vote matters, because we need to solution, recognizing now is the time. 4 years from now, I don't know what state we'll be in, but it's today we need to get the right leaders in City Hall, working together, collaborating with our communities, and engaging and holding proper accountability so that we stop the waste. So thank you, and whatever about whatever, and whomever your choice is, know your vote matters. So on October 24th, vote.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Miguel, your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Ebony, for putting together this all kinds of debate. It's shameful that only 3 of us show up tonight. And as Nikki said, the so-called Entron already announced to inherit the ward. 13 is not here tonight to share his comments and views of the ward. Aside from that, I think we have a great conversation tonight, and we agree on many topics. And we may agree or disagree on some, but at the end of the day, it has been respectful, and we treat each other with respect. we look forward to do the same with City Council. When we return back to in November, I think is the date set to return to City Council. We hope that one of us will be elected. I speak on behalf of the indigenous people of the city. I want to represent the missing voices at City Hall, and particularly since we're talking truth and reconciliation. We need to have representation at the table. Remember, nothing about us without us is the common theme for this year. Before it used to be diversity our strength, but now it has been changed for this something more global, more appropriate for our city, because this is indigenous land, and every time we read the land acknowledgement, we are the stewards of this land. We are in charge of protecting the land, the waters. We have to protect the environment, and that is how we have to move forward as a city. The environment is so important. We had to create green jobs, make transit free for everybody, deal with the food insecurity that we have in this city. It's shameful that for the last 32 years, we have been feeding the poverty industry. Food banks should be a thing of the past, not something normalized today as a permanent band-aid solution, my friends. That is not a way to move forward, to keep institutions that only hire a few people and benefit a few of them. I believe it's time for those places that were providing temporary solution to move on and give us those financial resources that we need to feed ourselves well. Living on the ODSP like myself, I don't have enough at the end of the month. Last week I was just scrapping to get by, and that is the reality of my residents. I live in TCAC. I am proud to be a representative for my building. I am proud to represent Regent Park Neighborhood Association. I am proud that we have won a community benefits agreement for Regent Park that would allow my community to escape poverty, to move out of that by creating good jobs, permanent good jobs, scholarships, home ownerships for residents. In phases 1, 2, and 3, it's shameful that only 17 residents qualify for home ownership. Now we're moving forward to request rent-to-own programs so that we can have pride in owning our own apartments that are being built in phases 4 and 5, etc., etc. We're doing a great things. In October 24, please remember when you see my name, vote for Miguel, Ward 13. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. Nikki, the floor is yours.
Nikki Ward, Ward Councillor, Councillor Ward. It kind of has a nice ring to it. It's certainly, I'm not going to have to change my the monograms on my towels to become your councillor. I'm going to talk about, say thank you to my colleagues here who have chosen and have had the courage to run for office, and have had the courage to respond to the questions. And I'm going to admonish, particularly those who regard themselves as the leaders in this race, for not showing up, for being cowards, for not being held to account at this early stage in the process, for not putting themselves into a position where their qualifications or their character can be judged. And I've judged the character and I've judged the qualifications of those who have chosen not to attend, and I've found them lacking. Let's be straight about this. This is an important job. We need to have a qualified candidate at City Hall because lives depend on it. This isn't frivolous. This isn't a stepping stone for a career. This is about people's lives, homes, and survival. And to not show up for this event and to refuse to be held to account tells me everything I need to know. I hope that it encourages other people to look at their choices more carefully. For myself, I am qualified to be your counsel. Not only do I care deeply about the ward at hand, but I have federal experience. Changing the law of Canada, changing the Constitution of Canada to include gender identity and expression is the hardest piece of legislation to change, period. The Constitution of Canada is the foundation of all other laws. And I and my team managed to do that from a position of apparent weakness. As an equity-seeking candidate, I applaud the diverse candidates joining, but I'd like to point out that there has never, ever been a trans woman in any position, ever in any parliamentary position in Canada, let alone at City Hall. The question isn't about an underrepresentation, it's a complete lack of representation. Now, I don't claim to speak for all trans women or all people with a disability, which is how I also identify, or elders. I'm older than the average person. But what I can tell you is that those intersections of equity have informed me and made me humble and made me recognize systemic oppression in all its evil forms. So if you are looking for an equity-seeking candidate, perhaps Nikki Ward is a place to look. But it's not just about equity. It's about the ability and the qualifications to do the job, because not only have I done successfully work at the federal level, but at the provincial level. And and at the municipal level, as the first board member of the 519, which is itself a city agency, I literally wrote the book on how language, on inclusivity in the city of Toronto for its 30,000, 40,000 employees. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why our campaign is endorsed by every major party and includes leading lights in human rights and in politics, such as Barbara Hall, or Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party of Ontario, or indeed leaders within the Liberal Party. You can go to the party and see who's who, because I've worked with all of these people across party lines. When it comes to this municipal election, there is a chance to make change. That's not always true municipally, but it is true at this occasion. I urge you to exercise your right, your duty to vote. I ask you to vote for me, Nikki Ward. NikkiWard.ca is the website. And I remind you that there are advance polls from the 7th to the 14th. Easy to access. They are all fully accessible sites. I've researched them out. As a person with a disability, that's important to me. From the 7th to the 14th. And then on October 24th to get out and vote. Please vote. Please let us change the pattern of the past years and vote for me, Nikki Ward, to be your next ward councillor here in Ward 13. Thank you.
And thank you so much, everybody, for attending tonight. That brings us to a close. This is usually the part where I remind my listeners voting day, but Nikki, you've done that for me.
It bears repeating. Go ahead and repeat it. I won't vote.
So voting day, guys, is October 24th. Early voting opens the 7th to the 14th. Get out and vote. I am a firm believer that the only way to affect change is to be part of it. And I encourage everyone to get out and vote. And with that, it brings tonight to a close. Thank you guys so much for attending, for participating. I wish you nothing but luck in your campaign trails. I personally, I'm excited for the city of Toronto. I'm excited for the future of Ward 13. So on behalf of Ebony, thank you guys. And that brings tonight to a close.
Thank